I forgot we can fly.
Yep, everyone loves us. Now we can fly!
The universe revolves around the Battletoads! Chant with me! We are God! We are God! We are God! What the? Coney, cut the work! There's friggin' frogs in here!
Battletoads was a beloved franchise in its day, originally releasing on the NES way back in 1991, having been created by Rare to rival the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games. They became renowned in their own right for their mix of platforming and beat-em-up styles of gameplay, as well as their unrelenting difficulty, especially on those notorious speeder bike sections, earning Battletoads an unquestioned spot on anyone's most difficult game list. The Battletoads did, however, lay dormant for over a quarter of a century, with the last game in the series coming back in 1994, despite the Rare Replay collection bringing the Toads to a new audience in 2015. Many, including myself, were hoping for a remake of the original title, with a number of outlets from Game Informer to Forbes listing Battletoads as a franchise that deserved a revival, but it never ever came to fruition. But then in E3 2018 we finally got confirmation that a new game was on the horizon. A year or so later we got our first look at the brand new Battletoads game, and I was skeptical. The art style screamed of little more than a poor Adult Swim show, and the dialogue was just the wrong kind of corny. Well, after 26 long years, Zitz, Pimple and Rash are finally back, but is it a totally radical return for the trio, or has any hope of combat croaked? Let's find out. Welcome to Eat Sleep Game. My name is Luke and I have been playing Battletoads. As I mentioned, I wasn't a huge fan of the visuals from the trailers, and while it does look like you are playing a cartoon, the cutscenes just look so poor. I get that perhaps it's easier for the artists and animators to go with this kind of art style, but it just looks like a poor imitation of a 90s cartoon, which is kind of ironic when you stop and think about it for a second. Although they used the same art style in gameplay, it looks significantly better, mostly because the lack of detail doesn't stand out as much in action. That being said, there is a good variety of colour in gameplay, and the visuals are a lot cleaner and crisper than they are in cutscenes on the whole. And the devs make really good use of the environment, leaving hints to puzzles that are easily missable if you're not paying attention. Each Battletoad is clearly defined by colour, and more of their personality is brought through in their updated design, from Pimple obviously being the big behemoth of the group, Zitz wearing not one but two utility belts across his chest and tactical gloves, making him look like the more tactical leader of the group, whereas Rash is the polar opposite, clearly being the cool one, rocking a pair of shades at all times. Overall, the visuals are fine. The game would have benefited hugely from a little more detail in cutscenes where they cannot hide behind the quick-paced action of gameplay, but as said, on the whole, it's fine.
Punching a baby.
But it's ugly! Drop the ugly baby!
Don't really drop it though, just set it down gently.
The voiceover is pretty poor, to be honest. It can be truly terrible at times, with most characters being so generic and cringeworthy, from Chet the hoverbike guy to the Dark Queen herself. They are all just so very bland, making the already dull and poorly written cutscenes that much more unbearable. The Battletoads themselves are fine, they're easily the most well done in the game, each with a distinctive voice that matches their personalities, but they are let down by the often moronic dialogue and wave after wave after wave of unfunny and poorly written jokes. The soundtrack and backing music is all pretty fun, if a bit generic. The main theme is the only one that really stands out, partially due to how often you hear it, but mostly because it's a modernised rock remix of the original theme. Overall, the music is decent enough, but none of it is particularly memorable. The Battletoads, Zitz, Pimple and Rash are living their best lives, beating up bad guys and saving the day, only to find out that they have been living a fantasy for 26 years. And when they get back to reality, they unfortunately find they are no longer famous, nor even remotely popular for that matter.
We're not frogs, we're toads.
The Battletoads. We're famous superheroes.
This just in. No, you're not.
And they have to adjust to the real life. When they find out normal life is not for them, they set out on a quest to stop the villains and regain their fame and popularity. I've got to be completely honest here, the writing is pretty terrible. Stale humour that plays too much on today's stereotypical cultures without really doing anything interesting with it. The game thinks just being very meta about its genre is enough, Random just isn't funny.
You'd be mean to me. That's what I have a mother for.
Have you found the other ones? The Arbaltoes? The Toadaloes?
Oh, the things we're looking for. The brutables.
Bartle bears?
The Tattletoes.
The beetle bugs?
Fire bats. The Jitsu bats.
Battle bees?
That's it.
That's it, battle bees.
The battle bees.
I genuinely think over the 5-ish hours of gameplay, I rolled my eyes more than The Undertaker in his 30 years of wrestling. Not a single one of the characters is the least bit endearing, with every single character just coming across as moronic and petulant. The Battletoads themselves are pretty interchangeable, with Rash and Zitz in particular both being practically the same character at times. And Pimple isn't that much better. He is just as moronic, just a bit bigger and stronger than the others. And before you ask, yes, he does get his obligatory tough guy becomes a pacifist section. Another odd thing the game does is take the classic Battletoads villain, the Dark Queen, and out of nowhere, team her with the trio and make her just as dumb as any other character in the game. She should be much more conniving and street smart than the rest of the cast, but she's little more than a goth girl with a British accent. Even the game's main villains, the Topiums, are just floating heads who spout cliched modernisms at each other. Their aim is to keep control of the masses by making the Battletoads famous again and using them to keep people brainwashed. But they completely lose interest in that within 5 minutes, and it's all brushed aside just for the final encounter. Gameplay unfortunately isn't all that much better. You can freely interchange between the cocky Rash, the level-headed powerhouse Pimple, and the leader Zitz, but other than Pimple, who is as mentioned a powerhouse so a bit slower and stronger than the others, there isn't enough variation between Rash and Zitz. They feel very similar despite their differing movesets. Combat is pretty straightforward. Each Battletoad has a quick, strong and 2 morph attacks, and you can spit gum which will stick an enemy in place for a few seconds. There are also 3 tongue actions which are tied to 3 separate buttons, which is a little frustrating to be honest. This could have been all done by a single button, negating the time spent fumbling trying to figure out which button to press to eat a fly and which one is to grapple, when they could just do separate things in separate situations, all with a single button. Combat, while fun enough, is just so easy. You do not need to be good at this game to get through. You can very easily just button mash your way through, even if you do find yourself dying. It's not a big deal. You will just get knocked back to last checkpoint and have to pick up any collectibles ahead. There are no consequences at all. I found that animations can take far too long to actually be acted out. A lot of the time when you are facing an enemy that you must dodge, you cannot move on to the next move, be it a jump, dodge or attack quick enough, often leaving you open for attack. This was especially evident when you'd been knocked down, because it takes an excruciatingly long amount of time for your toad to get back to his feet. Or flippers? There are far too many random out of nowhere minigames that have no explanation, nor are they any fun. This is especially the case late on when your ship is failing and you need to reboot it as quick as possible. There are no less than 9 brand new and unexplained puzzles that you must solve in an increasing amount of within a short time limit, and it is never ever clear which one needs to be solved at which time. There is a small display at the top with relevant symbols, but when there is so much new information getting thrown at you all at once, it is really difficult to keep an eye on the symbol and the location of the corresponding puzzle and the puzzle itself and the time limit. Just like the rest of the game, there is promise here. If each of these puzzles had already been introduced individually in the game before this point, it would have been a nice challenge. But when all 9 come out of nowhere and demand to be solved in 40 seconds or less, it is just overwhelming and hugely infuriating. The Dark Queen section is truly abysmal and is probably the worst part of the game as a whole. She is terrible to control. She is slow, she is heavy, and she is just frustrating. Mostly again due to how, just like the minigames, she is just randomly thrust into the limelight without any explanation or prior time to get to know how she controls. Which just leads to another frustrating and fumbling trial and error section, which once again is timed, which gives you 0 time to get used to yet another new mechanic in the game. On the other hand, there are the vehicle sections, which are really fun, but they just do not know when to end. They are almost obnoxiously long and pretty quickly go from really fun to just flat out frustrating. However, I almost found the opposite to be true of the bullet hell sections. They were without a doubt my favourite part of the game. They offered a good amount of challenge without becoming too frustrating, and as a result they were pretty rewarding once you figure out your routine and nail every enemy. It's such a shame because there is so much promise in each one of these bits of gameplay, but very few actually hit their mark. Most of them are completely wide of it, and with a little bit more time and care put into them, could have made the game a way better experience on the whole. In each level you can collect 6 gold plum bob looking thingies. 4 are just scattered around the level. You will get 1 as a reward for destroying all of a certain item in a level, such as balloons, and the final one is unlocked by getting an A rank in each one of the level's fights. But on the whole, they are just a pointless filler addition. You don't get anything for collecting them all. Hell, they are such an afterthought. They don't even have an actual name. They are just referred to as collectibles. Now, some of these collectibles will be found by doing a little puzzle here and there, and they're fine little distractions. They are kind of fun, but they offer very little challenge. As mentioned, I really like how they've put hints to solving each of these puzzles in the environment, like on a poster in the background, but they really are not challenging enough to need any hints, so I only noticed this after I have completed each one of these puzzles. I think it would have honestly just been a cooler idea if they thought a bit more about the collectibles and had, for example, old Battletoads memorabilia scattered around levels that were kind of just thrown away by people who don't want them anymore because the Battletoads are no longer relevant in this world. And these could have been nice little callbacks for fans of the franchise to their greater days, but it just feels like another missed opportunity with this game.
Stay calm. You're a queen. You're unflappable. Suck my frigging butt, you backstabbing punks! Chug my dump truck, you stinky wimps! Beep, beep, garbage butt backing up! I hate the Battletoads.
Battletoads in the end is a game that just doesn't know what it wants to be. It's got a lot of classic game styles sprinkled in, from a beat 'em up and a platformer to a vertical platformer and a bullet hell shooter, and its cutscenes are basically just a terrible Saturday morning cartoon, but at the same time it really wants to push the PG rating, and in the end its lack of direction is what hurts the game the most. It's such a shame because playing on those old school styles of gameplay would have been really cool if there was more focus into them. As it is, it's only really the bullet hell shooter and the vehicle sections that are really all that fun to play. As said, there is fun to be had in this game and there is some promise there, but there is just so little compelling me to really see this game through to completion, especially as by the point you're close enough to do it, the game isn't fun anymore. Honestly, if it wasn't for wanting to make this video, I would have put the game down after about an hour or so. I just cannot recommend this, even through Game Pass.
What did you do?
Well, I made him 3 inches shorter. Doesn't seem like much, but his entire life will change.